It's the inaugural record release from Discograffiti. Metal Machine Muzak is a slanted tribute to Lou Reed's divisive 1975 double LP Metal Machine music. Lester Bangs called it the greatest album ever made, but no matter how it hits you, it's always been the ultimate music freak secret handshake. My ambient reimagining features 4 16-minute, 1-second tracks, just like the original, and each one was created by a top-shelf indie rock visionary. Lou Barlow from Dinosaur Jr. and Sebadoh, Corey Hansen from Wand, W. Cullen Hart from the Olivia Tremor Control, and Mark Robinson from Unrest. That's right, not a slouch in the bunch, unlike 99% of the compilations you've ever begrudgingly purchased for the one and only band on it you just had to hear. Metal Machine Muzak will not be available on streaming. The digital version is finally available for purchase, and the vinyl will be shipped this summer. Pre-orders for the LPs are available now, but they're going fast. They're being produced in a very limited edition run of 300 numbered 180-gram metallic silver double LP gatefold copies, only 100 of which can be ordered online. These copies will be numbered from 1 to 100, and they're first come, first served. To order either the digital or the vinyl, just head over to patreon.com/discograffiti/shop. Again, that's patreon.com/discograffiti/shop. Don't miss out on Metal Machine Muzak, the ambient experience designed to make Brian Eno run screaming. Well, it's a staggering piece of work. I think it's a masterpiece. I really do. And I give it 5 stars.
Wow.
So many 5 stars, Dave.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff means a lot to me. But not that one single that we talked about. Nope.
That's fine.
It's okay.
We're going to bury that single in the ground.
No, you're going to learn how to play it, and you're going to open your new sets with it.
Bad single.
Go to your room. Welcome to Discograffiti, the Music Obsessives podcast that gives freaks like you and me the chance to connect with the brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebrow, and with 4 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. Each new guest swings a hard left into an area you either had no idea you needed to know about or know all about and can't believe you're not alone out there. This episode is sponsored by Cream Magazine. That's right, Cream is back. The magazine's bigger and better than ever now, overstuffed with exactly the kind of expert rock and roll journalism and skewed humor all you longtime listeners have come to depend on. It's a quarterly now and available by subscription only. Part of how I get paid is based on how many subscriptions this episode racks up. And that's where you come in, loyal listener. It is awesome that Cream is supporting independent podcasts like Discograffiti, and I'm asking you to subscribe to Cream in return. So I seriously need you all to hit pause, visit cream.com/subscribe, and enter the code DAVID at checkout. Entering the code will get you your shipping absolutely free. Again, that's cream.com/subscribe, and the code is DAVID. There's objectively no better way for a music obsessive to spend his hard-earned dough. Thanks again to Cream for supporting Discograffiti and being America's only rock and roll magazine. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on Tsunami! Psst. Along with our special guests, Jenny Toomey and Kristin Thomson. Here's just some of the many, many things Jenny, Kristen, and I touch on in this podcast. The story of how and why their label Simple Machines Records came to be, a track-by-track discographical discussion of most of what they released in the free version, and absolutely every last song they ever released in the director's cut, and finally, why the band decided to initially call it a day. And now, a quick word from Jenny and Kristen.
If there's anything that Simple Machines has loved in the past, it's music obsessives. And Dave and Discograffiti are music obsessives. So for that reason, I have become a proud member of Discograffiti's Patreon. And I understand there's an extra long cut of this very, very important conversation, this obsessive conversation we're going to be having with Dave. So do yourself a favor and head over to patreon.com/Discograffiti right now and subscribe to support the greatest music podcast on the planet. Hey, Kristen, what do you think about music obsessives?
I think music obsessives have a great place in this world, especially when they have their own podcasts. We're part of the Patreon community, and we encourage you to also subscribe. Go to patreon.com/discograffiti and join us.
Keep in mind, this director's cut is a half hour longer. So if you're a Toomey Kristin Thomson, Tsunami, and Simple Machines superfan like me, you're definitely going to want to check it out. Coming up, we've got a career-spanning interview with the Beatles' Pete Best, Sonic Boom, a.k.a. Pete Kember, rating the Spacemen 3, the Byrds' Gene Parsons, and a massive, many-guested launch into the Beach Boys' entire catalog. So don't miss out. Open up your listening app right now and subscribe. And away we go then! Our first guest is an indie rocker and arts activist who in 1990 co-founded the Simple Machines record label with a couple guys who absconded soon thereafter, unknowingly yet graciously leaving room for our second guest to step up and join her on the adventure of a lifetime. Guest number 2 left a position at the National Organization of Women in 1990 to co-lead Simple Machines through to its closure in 1997, operating out of a few group houses in Arlington, Virginia. Simple Machines was the first self-made label in D.C. to be run by women, and along with Teen Beat and Discord, they documented the D.C. punk and indie rock scenes. Lest we forget, our 2 guests also had a band, and oh my, what a band they had. Tsunami was also greatly influential in the DIY do-it-yourself movement among the punk, grunge, and indie communities, but we'll get to that in great depth momentarily. Through Simple Machines, our guests published 4 editions of the Simple Machines Mechanics Guide, a DIY music guidebook that demystified the process of giving music a physical form, back in the days when you could actually hold music in your hot little hands. Lads and ladies dissatisfied with how the fuck things are in general and don't intend to sit back and let it happen without not only putting up a fight, but ripping apart the foundation and implementing a nonstop barrage of long-lasting changes, would you please welcome 2 amazing women of whom I've been a supplicatory fanboy since 1991. It's the absolutely wondrous Kristen Thomson and Jenny Toomey.
Thank you, Dave.
Yay!
I thought the 2 of you fainted there for a second.
It is the kind of praise you like, wah!
The idea is to make you too shy to actually respond to any of the actual questions during the interview.
You'll be like, hello, hello.
I was trying to do the one clap that sort of is equivalent to our fan base.
No, that's not true. So wait, so I know you're you have a touch of self-deprecatory kind of vibe about your legacy, but you don't really believe that, do you?
Yes.
You do? Because I mean, at the time, like right in the beginning, when you were putting out singles and like before you even grew into a band who, you know, I mean, you were writing like killer songs, like back in the beginning when it was more of a screed than a song. I thought you were hot shit, like the hottest shit on the planet. And that was in the beginning, and you grew in leaps and bounds, even in fits and starts, some would say, if it was 1994. But first, I want to say that you had me pegged early on as your podcast guy from when the box was released, which I'm very honored by.
Well, I mean, Dave, you are obsessive about music. And a lot of people, when they talk to Kristen and I about Tsunami, they spend a lot of time talking about the record label, which is also cool. But it's nice to know that somebody is going to actually listen to the music and ask us questions about it. So I knew that we could trust you to do that, because that's exactly you.
Well, I mean, the label was a means to an end, was it not?
It was a necessity. It wasn't like anybody else was going to put out our records, if we didn't put them out.
Well, let me ask you this question. Would you have had the label if you didn't have a band?
No.
Right. The hierarchy then is established.
No,
Yeah.
Simple Machines existed prior to Tsunami.
Yeah, but not Choke and not Geek.
But I mean, the intention was always to have a band. You just established one before the other. But why did you establish one before the other?
It really was. Nobody would put Geek had recorded some music and Choke had recorded some music, and it was pretty clear nobody was going to put that out. And also, it was just what you did in DC. Everybody put out their own music. And so, it was a combination of necessity, and it's really fun to put out your own music.
During my research, it started striking me that your Mechanic's Guide is kind of like the anarchist cookbook for music-making revolutionaries who aren't as interested in hurting or killing people. Would you say that's
We're definitely not interested in hurting or killing people at all. I can say that's like 100% on brand for us.
Not killing people, that's part of your brand?
It is. It's totally part of our brand. It's among the top commandments.
You slay with sound, though, even from the very beginning.
That's nice to hear.
That much is true. Okay, so this is going to be a classic style Discograffiti star rating episode. But just to let you know, loyal listeners, we may have some punk rock style kickback happening here. I don't know if both ladies are going to be kicking back against the pricks, but I certainly have a long list of star ratings at the ready, and they've been amended and tweaked. I never just throw a rating down. I always question it multiple times through the process. So they're objectively accurate. All right, so what you mean to me. So I've been a huge fan of Tsunami from when I was in college, when I was about 20 years old, and my gateway drug was the single Geniuses of Crack. I stumbled on the word because I wanted to make sure it was the right plural version. The Geniuses of Crack / Answer Man single was my gateway drug, and I could not get enough of that single, and I still have. I have the Matchbook single, I have the Inclined Plane single, and they're all originals from right when they came out. The split single with Velocity Girl, Your Christmas Song, is one of the greatest Christmas songs of all time. You're an important band for me, and there were moments where I kind of lost the thread along the way as life happened to me and had its way with me. But never were you not an important, it wasn't just like you were putting out records. There was always the philosophical bedrock underneath that meant so much in addition to the music. And I don't even just mean the lyrics, because I'm not a lyrics guy.
You seem like you're a lyrics guy. In a lot of the interviews, I hear you talking about lyrics a lot.
Sometimes, but only for research purposes. But I naturally do not gravitate towards the lyrical thing unless it's Bob Dylan or a couple other exceptions. But I like that you generally do mix the vocals down low, especially in the beginning. And not because you don't have great voices. You both have great voices. You have a message, but you're not battering people over the head with it.
I don't know. I think we probably were just nervous about our voices initially, and also it was kind of the moment to blend the vocals pretty low, to have the distortion pretty high and the vocals pretty low.
We'll get
felt a little too pro to have them right up on top of everything. It probably felt a little too professional for us. So
my theory with your stuff, Kristen, is that it's almost like a documentary listening to you become more confident as the 90s went on. Your first couple of steps out of the gate, to me, are great songs. I don't think you started in a shaky place, but, Jenny comes along and forces you at gunpoint to become a singer-songwriter. And so you had to deal with it in the moment. But then, before you know it, you're writing some, not just deep songs, but it's like you're walking into a wardrobe of genres and trying on different styles and casting them off with every song. So it's amazing to listen to that happen. But before we get in too deep, let's introduce the characters in today's episode. So, of course, the two of you, and then in no particular order, Andrew Webster, John Paymer, Rob Christensen, Bob Massey, Amy Dominguez, and Luther Gray. So the story kind of starts with Jenny and John Paymer, first meeting at Positive Force in Arlington, Virginia group house that was filled to the brim with young punk rock activists. Paymer winds up relinquishing his room to you, Kristen. You'd moved from the D.C. area from Colorado in September 89, right? How did you land at Positive Force?
I mean, I was at Colorado College. I worked at the radio station like many students at the college radio station. And I was co-chair of the concert committee, so organizing the shows, and really love music. And as soon as I moved to DC, I could see flyers everywhere for, bands I'd heard of, like Fugazi and stuff like that. Just because Positive Force was very busy weed pasting for their benefit shows. And so one of the first shows I went to in DC, like about 2 weeks after I got there, was a Fugazi show that was a Positive Force show. So that's where I first saw Jenny. And then I just started doing stuff with Positive Force, going to the meetings, going to the demos and the things they were doing, the activities they were organizing. And then when a spot opened, which wasn't immediately, eventually a spot opened in the house and I moved in.
Was it an instant, eyes lock across the room kind of thing, or did it take some time for the two of you to warm up to each other?
Well, it wasn't that night where I saw Jenny up on stage making an announcement about the beneficiary. So I was like, whoa, that seems really cool. And she seemed so confident and everything. But we didn't really probably meet until a Positive Force meeting, right?
That's right. And another member of Positive Force, one of the founders, this guy, Mark Anderson, who also lived in the Positive Force house, met Kristen before me and said, there's this really cool woman, Kristen, and I think you guys are really going to like each other. And then we did really like each other.
And you wound up, again, before Tsunami, founding Simple Machines Records with Derek Dankla and Brad Siegel. He was a Positive Force housemate. And then Derek Dankla was your bandmate in Geek. And then Choke's Kingdom of Mattresses and the Wedge compilation came out before Tsunami was even a figment of anyone's imagination.
That's correct.
Those two guys moved on because history mandated that they do so. And then Kristen moved in.
Yes, that's exactly right. You've got the history correct.
So Andrew Webster from Geek comes in to play bass after Thanksgiving 1990, and with Paymer on drums. And what a great drummer. I mean, I really realized digging into this box set how mandatory he was to this band. It's almost like he's playing these prog kinds of rhythms to these songwriters who were just getting their sea legs, and yet somehow there's no discrepancy there. Nothing goes awry as a result of that bizarre combination. It works. It's an incredible marriage. So the basement of Paymer's childhood home in Falls Church, Virginia, was your rehearsal space. Was Mom bringing down lemonade and whatnot? Was she psyched that you were there?
I feel like the Paymers were very generous. We were probably making quite a racket, meaning just fumbling through things. But, it was a great place to practice. They were never get out. So, that was really nice of them.
Yep. You can't say enough good things about his unusual style of playing drums. And we sort of really had to face that head on when we had to relearn all our songs. And yeah, you're absolutely right. John Paymer doesn't play like anybody else.
Yeah. And it's really kind of neat because, correct me if I'm wrong, neither of you took lessons or know how to read music, anything like that, right? Jenny, did you or no?
Well, I sang in a really professional choir and I played flute for a couple of years. So I know a little bit about reading music, but just the slightest hint of knowing about that.
Because you do have a little bit of a beef heart kind of a thing, like an untrained yet mystically complex approach to some of the stuff that you do. Not everything. I mean, there's songs that are more straightforward, but then some of it is Jesus Christ, it's the inner workings of this thing are like a Swiss watch. Talk to me about the sound you were going for at that time, especially the early period guitar sound that dominated the Deep End and previous to Deep End EPs and single time.
Well, I mean, you said earlier that we forced Kristen to play with us at gunpoint, but really it's at fun point. We just wanted to have fun. So,
Kristen, had you ever written or recorded songs before in your life, or did you literally step into Positive Force and just grab a notebook and you just started? And did it come naturally?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been in some bands, but not playing any instruments, and I can play piano, but that just like Jenny, I mean, yes, I could read sheet music for a time, but it's not something I was keeping up with. And also, Tsunami was not a sheet music band, so there was that. But like Jenny said, we were all encouraged to like write a song. The beginnings of songwriting are like kickball babe, which is like 2 chords or 3 with the slidey part, and like 3 verses that are just made of like schoolyard taunts kind of language. So that kind of fit in Tsunami's early ambition, which was what's super fun and fast and reflects like bricks and be happening and fun stuff going on. But then I would say like when there were other songs that came in later, it's hard for me to write songs. It takes me a long time. I get really stuck in lyric land and I get really nervous that it's not good enough. But this like the structures of the songs was something we just worked on together. So it was definitely like band contribution. I very rarely came with like, it's going to be just like this, like directing people. So it was a lot of just everybody jumping in on an idea.
The plan was to debut the band at a New Year's Eve party, December 31st, 1990, except you did not. But by February 91, you had gigged a few times. And the early period of Tsunami, which, you know, I've iterated many times, I have a very soft spot for. You know, I knew if it came out on Simple Machines, it was either good or at least it was going to be interesting. And so, sight unseen, if I saw the label, I would buy it. And so really, I didn't know it was Dave Grohl. I bought that tape called Late, and that was Dave Grohl's very first thing he ever did, right?
It was his first solo release. Right. He was in another band called Dame Bramage, I think, and I think he might have been in a couple bands. That thing about being in a lot of bands is also very DC.
Yeah, so I have all kinds of stuff. It's lost in the mist of time because I think a lot of these bands, they would put out one thing and then, because it's also a DC thing based on talking with Mark, to break up a lot of bands. So a lot of these bands came and went, and that was part of the idea behind the band in the first place. But thankfully not with you. So phase 1, kids playing music, 1991 to 1994. March 1991, the Cow Arcade cassette, self-released. I love this. I had not heard this before, and I think everything on it is great. I prefer the version of writing letters on this to the one that's on Deep End. The version of She Cracked is fantastic. And then, you know, Kristen, your work on Breakdown is amazing. The off-kilter harmonies are perfect. And then there's this sort of doom-laden sludge punk style that is of its time, but doesn't feel time-stamped or dated. And then Paymer's stop-start figures from the panic-laden punk attack going back and forth between that and a codeine-style lurch is really great. I mean, it's not what I would necessarily associate with someone's first or second song ever. You know, I'd be pretty proud of that.
Thank you. At that point, especially, I was just like all ears because you were surrounded by bands doing really interesting things, like bands that ranged from, say, Lois Maffeo to like My Bloody Valentine or Slint, like people that were all over the map as far as what they were trying to achieve sonically or lyrically.
All the aspects of all the recording artists that you respected, you're running through your own sausage grinder of influences, and it's coming out your own unique way. And the band, to me, already feels 100% together and stamped in stone. And I would give this 5 stars. I love Cow Arcade. It took me by surprise. Like I said, I had not heard this one before. So July 91, it came out in July 91. It was recorded in May 91. The Head Ringer 7-inch, which Mark Robinson wanted to let me know by text, was named after an Unrest song. He wants to get into every episode somehow. Otherwise, is there any correlation?
He's jealous. He's a little jealous.
Well, he should be. It's one release that came out in 91 that he wasn't behind somehow. Well, your first single already feels like a leap forward from Cow Arcade. You're all tight but loose. You can hear the songwriting style fall into place right at the go with the riff from Flameproof Suit. It immediately gets stuck in your head when you first hear it. And the construction of Flameproof Suit already conveys all kinds of growth from that riff. So, Kristen, are you following in Jenny's footsteps and refusing to rate this material?
I can try.
Let's go back to Cow Arcade. What do you give Cow Arcade?
What's the point scale?
It's up to 5 stars, but you can do decimal points, fractions. I always use fractions if I can't decide between one or the other.
Okay. It is tough to rate your own stuff. I would say like a 3, but it's mostly for effort and for youthful enthusiasm and efficiency of getting things out because, we were already playing shows and we wanted to capture things and sort of have things, cassettes for sale, but mostly it was like, let's go in the studio and do this really quick and then carry on. So I like thinking about Cow Arcade as a moment in time for Tsunami.
You needed a cassette to get a show, too, a little bit.
How about Headringer, or do you want to hear my rating first?
Well, I'm worried because you started on 5, so there's only one way to go.
I want to go about down, yeah. 4.5. I give this one 4.5.
That's amazing. All right.
Yeah, I like that one. I think it's a 4. One thing I remember about Headringer, first of all, we squeezed 5 songs onto a 7-inch, which, that's kind of like pushing it, but it's fine. We got it all squished on there. But I like that, Jenny, I don't know if you remember this, but there was an effort to get everybody to write a song or have a voice on the early stuff. And the fact that Ski Trip's on there means that Andrew's voice is on there, which I love the song Ski Trip. And then Kickball Babe is on there too. So there's like a nice mix of people's contributions to Tsunami on it.
I love Ski Trip. I love that it's as intense as the title is so unintense. That's one of my favorite things about it. And also the harmonies there are really good. It's a great example of those because they're very unique. It feels like a unique connection that you have harmonizing. Also, the discrepancy or the energy shift between the steamroller bellowing of the title and the chorus with the comparatively subdued, almost ballad-like leaning of the verse.
Yeah, and I think that was one we probably wrote in 10 minutes. So that was definitely of the Bricks blueprint of just write something silly that rhymes quickly.
Kristen, you gave this, what did you give Headringer?
I'm trying to be judicious here so we don't run out of stars. So I'm going to say 3.5.
Okay. 1992, although recorded in November 91, Geniuses of Crack, which is absolutely one of your masterpieces. The title track or the A-side is in my top 5 Jenny Toomey songs of all time, although possibly top 10 now because I just discovered Antidote, which I had not heard before. So that just blew me away. But it's got that emotional apocalypse of the ages feel to it. That riff is so painfully cathartic. And all the melodic changes in the song, I am so completely in love with. And this, almost more than any other song in your canon, showcases all the great ways in which being, quote unquote, unschooled wound up being used to your advantage. And the jam out section at the end always gets me revved up because at that time in 91, 92, you were doing these songs that had these really interesting codas to them. The one that always comes to mind for me is Fillings, the Grenadine song. That may be, my all-time favorite song by you. But, in the end, it's taking this instrumental section and going someplace else entirely. It's like you're zooming off into the sky somewhere else, taking a hard left and going off into the clouds. And I always felt that way about Geniuses of Crack, but in a harder way. It doesn't have that soft puffiness to it. It's a little bit more hard-edged. It's one of my favorite songs of the decade. It really is. Wow. I love this song, and I like it better, if I'm going to be honest, than the singular version on Deep End.
Interesting.
I feel like you cleaned it up. And also I feel the same way about Fillings. The single version of Fillings, there's something that's touched by magic that I feel like re-recording it. And this is something that Robert Schneider said that I thought was very profound in the episode where we're talking about Strawberry Alarm Clock, is that if you have a song, the first time you record it, make sure that is going to be the version that is going to be the one you're happy with, because it'll be the best one. I believe that is the case with you. It
can get more robotic, and definitely that was a song. Once we wrote that song, I don't think we ever played a show where we didn't play that song. It was a very sad song. It's kind of a very melancholy song. So if you can capture the sadness, if the sadness is newer or more immediate, maybe there's more of that on the first version of it. And then it becomes kind of more of a performance of sadness. I think it's interesting too, like that sometimes you can actually put more emotion on a cover of someone's song than your own songs sometimes in some way. I don't know why that's the case, but there's just something freeing about inhabiting somebody else's universe as opposed to your own. And to the simplicity of that song, it's really interesting because there's a place in the chorus that's pretty complex. It sounds complex, but it's really just moving one finger 3 places in the same fret. And when I found it, I couldn't believe it existed. Like, I just couldn't, because like we really were working with very basic tools, and to feel like you could get something sophisticated out of something that wasn't really that hard to do, but that I hadn't heard before was like, I think I even told Kristen, I was like, Kristen, let's look at this. Listen to this.
Yeah. I mean, I remember us when Jenny came to practice with, I mean, it's a vague memory, but I was like, wow, this song is like very advanced, if you will. Like it was like amazing lyrics, and also just the structure was so great that even when we play it now, I feel there's like a physical reaction when we play it. I love playing that song. It
really is a very special song. And what I love about the single is that you really have a yin yang with Answer Man, because that's sort of the chin up flip side yin to the depressive yang of Geniuses of Crack. So as a piece, it works very well. And this is a hard 5.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for that.
I give it 4.7.
4.7? Mark would be very proud of you. He loves the decimal points. Okay, summer of 92. I'm guessing it was a happy time. It certainly was for me. I remember starting that summer off by taking my watch and smashing it with a hammer, because time did not exist for me. It was a very formative summer for me and for you. So this, unfortunately, due to manufacturing and mixing problems, was not released for another year or so. It came out in May 93, and it came out as Deep End, recorded in Amish country, as one does when one has a DIY project. They go to Amish country. Did you go to Hershey Park when you were there? No?
No time.
Deep End. Tell me about Deep End. Tell me about your thoughts on Deep End, likes and dislikes. Was it what you set out to make, your first LP? And because your albums are all so different, was this a place that you saw as a place that you would possibly want to return to? Or let's get these songs out, make a document of them, and grow and move on from here?
Kristen, do you want to talk about why it took so long for the record to come out?
Yeah, but Jenny, definitely correct me. I mean, yes, we were definitely interested in documenting things. I think at some point we decided we had enough songs to record a full record, which was the case. And we were already touring. We're playing a lot of shows. So all the stuff had been road tested, if you will. Like for the most part, we didn't wait, like secretly hoard songs to record and then play them live. It was a lot of like, this one's ready. Let's see if people like it kind of thing. So I just suspect that at least half of these songs we were already playing live. It's a nice mix of stuff that's like the same kind. You would say like, oh, that's Tsunami. If you hear it, you hear like what the songs are about, the lyrics, what the song structures. But then there's others that are different. Like Valentine is very different than the others. And we had one cover, Water's Edge, which is written by Mark Edwards from My Dad Is Dead. It's kind of a solo project, and it was a little more like very dry, unemotional delivery of songs. And so if you listen to it, our version of Water's Edge is very different than his. So, but he's a great artist.
Wildly dramatic.
Yeah.
The first thing that strikes me about that song. It's also my least favorite song on the record.
Well, that's so funny. It's like our most liked song on Spotify or something like that.
Jen Pelly goes crazy for it in the liner notes. And, I was like, well, I'm going to get hate mail from this, but it's one of the rare ones on this that I wasn't connecting with.
That's all right. But you asked about like production and stuff. So the early version of Deep End, we were going to put it out on Simple Machines, pretty much self-financed. However, Cargo Records in the United States, I think, offered to support us. Maybe it was going to come out on Cargo or some sort of co-release kind of thing. But then we chatted with them for a bit. But then, Discord had already a partnership with Southern Studios, which had offices in London and a distributor in Chicago. And John Loder at Southern was really interested in Tsunami. I think came over to see us play, right, Jenny?
I think he saw us accidentally when we played at Maxwell's one night.
Right.
which is documented in a Maximum Rock and Roll Scene Report interview about Tsunami that Ken Catkin was mentioned in. But yeah, so we were going to put it out with them. And then John said that he thought that we could record it better and he wanted to re-record it with us. And so we went out and recorded. We tried re-recording it from scratch in London. And at the end of it, we thought it sounded too slick. And so we went back to the original pressing. But I really wish we had that copy. I mean, we maybe do. I have like boxes of cassette tapes, and there might be one in there that is it. I would really love to hear what that had sounded like now. But,
do you think it would be better, or are you just curious about it?
I don't know. I mean, like you were talking about how you liked the lyrics low and the distortion high on the early stuff. And I think we corrected or maybe overcorrected that in the second version of it. And I just would be interested in what the ideas were there. I'm sure there were more harmonies. I'm sure there were other melodies and parts that we had put on that I just wish I knew what it sounded like.
John Loder's studio was many guitars, lots of amps, and just like an incredibly long, big board and stuff. They had everything, and so very different than the environment that we recorded in prior to that. So there was that luxury of trying anything. But what Jenny said is true. I think it sounded too professional when it was all done. So
it feels perfect to me as far as the sound goes, because especially when you keep all of your work contextual. It's what I love about doing this show the most, because I always try to listen to a band's work all together, because the context and the role that this album plays in your catalog, I feel like it should sound like that. Or else, how do you make that progression from this? There is a beautiful arc to, how your career goes, and this being produced like that is crucial to that arc. My capsule review is Deep End is packed with solid tunes, and for me acts as an LP-length exclamation point at the end of the sentence you've thus far written with all of your singles and EPs. It's a brutally tender continuation of the energy and raw power that you brought to those early singles, which to me isn't as much a 7-inch breadcrumb trail that builds to this, it's just a carryover. For me personally, if I had to pick, which I don't, thank God, I prefer your rapid fire Starburst 45s by a slim margin. But I really love this record, and I bought it right when it came out. There's obviously an upside to not having been intensely overschooled or having gotten any, tons of lessons in playing or writing. I mean, almost no one's representative of that upside like Tsunami, really. And it's only by the time the second side begins to wrap up that I'm beginning to hear hints of some tunes that just feel not quite as strong to me. The first side to me is excellent. The second side is strong, to me a little bit less so, but it wraps up with a classic. So every time I walk away from it, I am appropriately worked over and totally dazed. That riff on Stupid Like a Fox, I'm always walking away thinking about that. But again, it's writing letters, which your original performance of, I am just crazy about. And this one, it feels like how I feel about Fillings on the record versus the single. You're listening to a nerd speak right now, by the way. And then Skinny, I don't like quite as much. But like you said, Valentine, the chorus especially. The chorus of Valentine is just unbearably moving. And the way that the record starts out, too, except for me, Water's Edge, the whole first side is absolutely amazing. And Kristen, your song, Lucky, is terrific. It slows things down, but adds textural dynamics during the course of the side. It's perfectly sequenced. This one I listened to in the lead up to doing this taping, somewhere between 10 and 15 times.
Wow. God, that's a lot. Do you want to file an OSHA report? Tsunami Incorporated. The hypnosis is working, Kristen.
That's right. What do you think, Chris? What's your rating?
My rating? It gets hard when you're trying to do a whole album. I'm sure other folks have said this too. I think it captures that version of Tsunami really well. I think it was probably right that we used the Catbox version, the original recording, just to capture the energy and like the moment in time that studio represented, because we were like in a row of bands that recorded there at the same time, like Velocity Girl and the Lilies. So it was kind of like that too had an influence on everything. So I'm going to give it a 4.2.
Nice. Jenny, I'm not going to try to coerce you into this. I'm curious on how you feel about this as the first album that you came out with.
It's interesting. Looking at it, there are songs that are among the first ones we've ever wrote. So like really, really early, Writing Letters is one of them. In a Name is one of them. And then ones that we probably wrote just before we were in the studio, like Valentine was probably that. And probably Stupid Like a Fox was as well. And you can see the sort of brattiness of some of and the silliness of some of the early songs are beginning to be complicated by our exposure to like catty fanzine people. And the early stuff is very insular. We're just singing for our friends, like, and then as people start writing about it, the sexism is coming in a lot more. And so I can see that on like Lucky and Waxed and Skinny. And then also like the major label stuff, like on Slugger. So it is definitely mixed. Like, I think it really is like, it is a mixture of that old Tsunami, that bratty, young, silly Tsunami, and the beginnings of the sort of moodier Tsunami that was later.
Are there things on this that you don't connect with from, 2024, Jenny?
We're relearning Kristen's song, Lucky, and I love it. It's really, really fun to relearn Kristen's songs because she's going to be singing some songs when we tour. But that I don't connect with? I mean, frankly, Writing Letters, not that much. I like parts of Stupid Like a Fox, but like I think I became a better lyricist later on. So there are moments where In a Name is just like bratty. I like it okay. It's hard to say that. It's like saying like, which of your friends don't you like anymore or something like that. I think if I was closer to this record, so like when we were working on the next one, I probably would be more bratty about these. And I was trying to stretch into a different direction. But in retrospect, it's just like looking at old Polaroids of yourself that you thought were unflattering when you were younger and realizing like, look how young and happy you looked, or look how, that's a great photo, or look, that's our bedroom from back then. Like, I'm so glad I have this photograph. So it's a little hard that way. I think probably I would have been meaner to it if I was closer to it. But as I get farther away from it, I have a lot more patience with it.
That's a great explanation. Oh, hi, I'm Dave Gebrow. I threw my career as a licensed hearing instrument specialist in the trash, sold my house, and moved to the East Coast with my wife and 5-year-old son in order to focus on making the ultimate weekly podcast for music obsessives thrive. But weekly wasn't enough for me, so I bumped it up to 4 shows a week. Becoming a subscriber to Discograffiti's Patreon gives you access to hundreds of exclusive episodes. As a 2-show per week private, you get the weekly show by and for our Patreon family, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. As a 3-show-a-week lieutenant, you'll get early release, ad-free, extended director's cuts of the main show. They're the shows as they were intended to be heard. Plus, you'll gain access to half the Patreon archive and the upcoming Beach Boys Behind the Mirror companion episodes, which will feature dozens of special guests from within the Beach Boys camp talking about and rating their music. But as a 4-show-per-week major, you'll be drowning in a flood of must-hear binge listening, because I'll be bombarding you with episodes about super cool bands that are too subterranean for free Fridays. It's like going to music college, but with a tuition that makes all kinds of sense. Plus, our entire Patreon archive is yours. Discograffiti's Top 10, our Buried Treasure show, Rock Cousteau, our Slag Off show, Queasy Listening, and the Private Press with Paul Major. And all that for the price of only a cup of coffee a week. Times are tough, you say? Fret not, because there's a $1 tier. Or you could just join as a basic member and buy episodes piecemeal from our Patreon shop. Don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not giving. Check out patreon.com/discograffiti to find the tier that's right for you. Once again, that's patreon.com/discograffiti. The Season's Greetings split 7-inch with Velocity Girl, Could Have Been Christmas, is I believe one of your all-time best songs. I have the single. There's literally not a single thing about it I don't love. I love how it staggers out of the gate. There's a hesitancy about the beginning of it that still to this day kind of gives me shivers, how it begins. Your vocal is stunning, and the song seems to float in midair like a cloud, but it's like doomy and dreamy in equal measure. This blew me away when I first got this, and I got it immediately. This is a classic for me. This is 5 stars.
It's great. Well, I mean, we were so excited to get to do that with our friends, Velocity Girl, because, we had just done a bunch of tours with them. We were social friends. We'd hang out with them all the time, go see shows. So it was really lovely to get to be asked to do that. And Bob Weston did a great job there then. You're right. It does really feel like you're hanging in a snowy air.
Yeah, it's got a very, very unique vibe to it. And it creates a very singular mood that you don't really repeat after this. You have songs that you come back to and go back to a similar well, but not in exactly the same way. So the Diner 7-inch recorded in October 92. This again, just like the Geniuses of Crack thing, you have a yin-yang perfection with Load Hog and Gold Digger. But now we flip it. So we have the Happy on the A side, and we're in Frownsville for the flip. And Gold Digger, Kristen, this is a classic ballad. This is yours, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. A truly glum and excellent piece of work. Definitely one of my favorite of your songs. And Load Hog, definitely a much more sprightly rhythmic style. And you're immediately in a higher and airier gear. The song's got like a triumphant smile teased up at the corners of its mouth. Something tells me if you really went for, that Hitsville territory that you turn your back on with Deep End, that if you applied that to this could have been a hit.
Well, Load Hog was originally a geek song, and Derek Dankla played a role in writing almost all of it. There were little bits that I added into it, and we grabbed it and used it. So it may sound different because of that, because it came out of Derek Dankla's magical head. But I also agree. I think Gold Digger is just an amazing song by Kristen. I love the aesthetic of that 7-inch too. Just like, it's just beautiful. There was a tasty diner that we would all go to, that there used to be like 6 of them around DC, or 4 or 5 of them. And there was one right near my high school. So like stealing a lot of the sort of images from where we lived. And the silver is so beautiful.
This one is 5 stars for me. There's no question about it.
Well, thank you. I'm going to give it like a 3.9, only because I haven't had a chance to really revisit either of those songs yet, like really think about it. So maybe I'm rating it too low, but I don't want to. I'm trying to manage my expectations.
You're afraid you're going to disappoint yourself by overliking the music?
I love Load Hog, but there's a lot of, and I just haven't thought about Gold Digger in a while, meaning like really for some of the stuff that we're working on now, we're like, revisiting this song that we haven't played in a while. I get it. And I remember more about why we wrote it, but I read the lyrics, I kind of know what I'm talking about, but I haven't thought about Gold Digger for a while. So
I recommend you let it occupy your thoughts on a consistent basis.
Thank you. Will do.
Your next single is the only single I don't like by you guys. Souvenir Folder.
All right. Well, this interview is over.
Souvenir Folder. Do you mean the beautiful Arlington one?
Yeah. It's the only one that I don't connect with. So
all right.
Sometimes an Ocean feels to me as close as Tsunami has sounded to being a grunge band. I missed this one back in the day. Like, I don't remember. I didn't buy it. I didn't see it when it was out.
It was an Australian 7-inch, Australian label. And I don't know, besides our mail order, whether it ever appeared in US stores. So that may be why you never saw it.
I really like Sometimes an Ocean because it was totally different than any of our other songs. I wish we could play that song. I wish we could figure out how to play that one on this tour. And it's another one that there's absolutely no way to sing it.
Why wouldn't you be able to play it? I don't understand why, because there's so many songs I would think would be a lot more complicated than this one.
I think the singing and the picking that part correctly is just probably hard torture for me. What I really like is the chorus on it.
I don't hate it. I would give it 2.5 stars, which is not a low rating.
No, 50%.
The Mendoza line. So there we go.
We won't be graduating with those numbers.
No, look, it's literally the only thing you've ever put out and I really did go back and listen to it again and again and again and again. And it's just, I personally don't like the 2 songs on it that much.
So is this when the OSHA report should be filed?
For us?
No, look, listen to me. I'm looking at all the ratings coming up, and you're going to be embarrassed in the opposite way. So,
we're already embarrassed.
Seriously, trust me. Our band could be your life Minutemen comp. Mike Watt rated the Minutemen on this show. Courage. You did Courage. You did it really well. It's a propulsive, triumphant, flag-waving, feedback-streaked Minutemen primer that in 2.5 minutes conveys the messy messianics of that great group. Also, great use of feedback. It's just a stellar cover. I give it 4 stars.
Yay! I give it more than that because Jenny added like 7 tracks of harmony for the courage. And I remember you going in and doing it again and again and again just to build like the courage, which is a great studio trick.
I don't know if Mike Watt would like it or not if you played it for him, because I'm sure it's not in the right key, playing the right notes, which also is true about Jonathan. Because I just looked it up the other day to say, like, this is how I play it, but I wonder how different that is from him. And She Cracked is quite complicated, the chords in that, but not how we play it. But we also have an ascent or a descent. Yeah, we have a descent in our version of She Cracked that he doesn't have. He stays on one note.
Yeah, I like it because, you make that song yours, and it's like practically a standard. So that, to me, that says a lot about a band, just exiting the starting gate. I love this stretch of singles here. So the Inclined Plane 7-inch comp, which I own, Beauty Part 2. I've always loved this song. I've owned it since, I believe, the day it came out. I love the stop-start dynamics of the folky verses and the doomy, grungy choruses. This has got everything I like about Tsunami built right into its core. Definite 5 stars.
Wow, that's nice. It is a cover.
Is it?
Did you know that?
I didn't know that. Who wrote this one?
It's the band Flower, which is some of the brothers from that are in Versus were in Flower. It was before Versus.
Okay. I know of the band, but I've never heard their version of it. And it sounds like a Tsunami song. But again, It's making the cover your own. That's cool.
Yeah.
Coming right off of Courage.
We added a bunch of lyrics to it at the end in the chorus because they were singing something and we couldn't figure out what they were singing. But yeah, we loved Flower and we love Versus. But we re-released the Flower record on Simple Machines.
That's awesome. It's a great song.
Great band.
This entire stretch is nuts. The Team Beat 100 comp, which I own again, Brick Book Building. When you were mentioning twee before, I was going to throw this in because there's a certain level of cute in the vocal for which you don't usually allow, Jenny, and which I honestly really appreciate, but understand why you didn't go there as often as you did. And it really works here. It's catchy as hell. It's memorable as fuck, especially for a 1-minute song.
What a cool idea that was, right?
That was the rule. Had to be 1 minute.
Yeah. 5 stars.
Why don't more people write 1-minute songs?
Then comes one of my favorites, the Matchbook 7-inch. The design is incredible. I've got it right here. The songs are 2 of your best songs. Not Living is one of my all-time favorites. The dynamics, they way transcend where you were in your growth cycle at that point, especially in the portentous build of the pre-chorus with that Twilight jangle that charges maniacally into the punk onslaught when the chorus kicks in, and then stopping on a dime at the end of the song was the right move too. This is possibly my favorite Kristen song.
Oh, thanks.
It's
Thank you.
So good. This is a really good song.
Thank you. It's fun too because that song, we didn't play it live very often, but Jenny and I both singing most of the way through it, which is always fun.
Consider it for rotation.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And Bossa Nova, it's, I believe, 1 chord, but it's so stunningly beautiful. It just very, very creative what you're able to wring out of that. These 2 songs together work so well. It was just one of those singles that showcased the various talents that each of you brought to the table as songwriters for the band. Hey, it's one of the last great Tsunami 45s. This is definitely 5 stars. Everything about it.
Thank you.
Wow.
I think it's like a 4.3 just because it's like the full package.
So the 4.3 is like your 5?
I guess.
And then comes the last single for a while, Working Holiday 7-inch. Kidding on the Square. So a year in and you're already messing with all kinds of tricky time signatures, while at the same time somehow avoiding prog signifiers like the plague, which is some kind of trick. It's one of the greatest vocals that Jenny's ever laid down, a truly remarkable achievement. 5 stars. I love Kidding on the Square. And I love the version on the record. I really do. I don't know which one. Is it a remake? This, to me, is not a drop-off when it gets to This Heart's Tremolo.
We must have recorded it again in Chicago with Brian Paulson, because the first one we did with Red at Studio Red.
Yeah, I almost can't remember that at all.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we recorded it a second time for that. But this is going to get almost my highest mark, 4.8, because I love this song. Because it's like very unconventional as how it's constructed, great lyrics. But for me, I was like, gosh, I can smell this song because it like reminds me of Simple Machines and like living in this house and being surrounded by boxes. So yeah, very evocative.
For me, I won't give it a lower score because I'm not scoring it. But there are some things with some of these songs, I wish we had more musicians in the band at certain moments. Like I would love those choruses with like horns or something like that. Now, or even just like building up to horns or something.
But you are building up to horns. The horns are right around the bend.
Yes, that's true. We're reaching towards the horns in my head. But like playing that song now, I feel like there are moments where I feel like I want more in it. But I do think, like Kristen says, it absolutely documents a moment in time.
So Lollapalooza was July and August of 1993. The band were invited to play the side stage. You went on to play 6 shows with Sebadoh, Free Kitten, and Thurston Moore. How was Lollapalooza?
Hot.
Was it no good?
No, it was just hot, like generally hot, like temperature hot.
Right.
But I'll say looking back, it was kind of like summer camp. You would go off and instead of like staying in some sort of tent behind the stage, we would go out and try and sell merch through the chain link fence or go out and interview people or wander around, So there was a lot of fun to be had, taking advantage of like just being out in the crowd. Like we weren't allowed to leave the compound until Primus was done, who were headlining on the main stage. So you got to see Dinosaur Jr. or Primus on the main stage, like from a distance usually. But it was great, but it was just really hot and also really hard to keep up with the buses. So
did your audiences afterwards start getting bigger as a result, do you think, a direct result of you appearing on those shows?
I don't think so. I mean, I think mostly we were really excited because the side stage for our tour was Sebadoh, who we loved, and Free Kitten and Thurston Moore, and we were big Sonic Youth fans. And so, like, that was incredible to get to play those shows. But it was really hard to play them like in the middle of the day at 150 degrees with no shade, like on a racetrack. I've never in my life felt more like all of my water is evaporating from my body, just rolling down my body and disappearing. So that part was hard. And then also just like, the main stage is just drowning out once you start playing. Those elements of it made it harder, but it was also, like Kristen said, like a weird fun house mirror, and we just took it as a challenge. Like we just like ran out there. I had cassette tapes of interviewing all the people who were wandering around and buying smart drinks, which they don't allow you to sell anymore because people get hives, because I know I got them from all the niacin in them, and like all the crazy stuff that was happening, like people running to watch the Guitar Techs tune the first band's guitars and like waiting to be there instead of listening to actual Thurston Moore playing on the other side of the stage or the other side of the field. So that was fun and weird. Like we made our own fun, but it was really tiring.
Well, we are now coincidentally at phase 2, adults working in the music industry, 1993 to 1998. So we're at the recording October 1993 of The Heart's Tremolo. I remember buying it. I remember listening to it, and I remember listening to it again and again and again. I'm going to say at the outset that I believe that this truly is Tsunami's masterpiece, and there's not a single song on it that I don't think is absolutely incredible. I mean, and it holds up. I listened to it a whole lot 30 years ago, and it blew me away listening to it again because it was a record that, for whatever reason, I hadn't heard in a while. And it was still so powerful, still the same, if not more so. I mean, your vocal on Be Like That, your bellow, I know you probably didn't take voice lessons between record 1 and record 2, but it's a very powerful, commanding iteration of what you were doing on the prior record, which felt like a younger person. This felt like adults working in the music industry. It felt like you had different concerns. You had more advanced concerns. It sounds like there's a lot of texture in this record that was, forget about there being less of it. It just wasn't there on Deep End. It's really a record. It hangs together as a record. It's sequenced perfectly. My only complaint is there's no Kristen songs. And I'm curious why there's no Kristen songs, because your work previous to this and your work after this is great. So what happened here?
Okay, so this might be revisionist history, but I thought about this last week when somebody asked me about, we were kind of running through the timeline on things. So this was recorded in October 93. I think 1993 was our busiest year for touring. And we actually recorded this record while on tour. So we were like, play shows, stop in Chicago, record, and then keep going, right? So that was that. But it was also the year of Working Holiday. So we were putting out another 7-inch and mailing out like 800 of them every other month, which involved lots of things: getting the bands, designing the thing, getting it printed, putting them together. There was a lot. So I cannot believe that 1993, we did all those things together. So I think I just didn't have any time to write these songs. I think, honestly, there was other things I was doing, you know?
And Jenny was on a tear. I mean, this material,
Yeah,
I would be surprised
totally.
if we weren't in agreement here. What do you think about these songs?
I think I like most of them. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a darker, slower, bluer record. Like, we're definitely not as bratty and silly. We're way more serious on this record. I don't think there's any songs that are, I mean, there might be some humor in some of these.
Yeah, I think it's much more like serious. I mean, if I had to use an adjective, it would be serious, but dynamic too. You know, we could get very quiet. We can get very loud. We can have 4 layers of harmonies on Quiet Nova, you know, like a lot of things.
I love Quiet Nova.
In the dynamic range.
I love that Fast Food Medicine is like your take on what blues would be if you would be able to create the blues from the ground up. That's what Fast Food Medicine feels like to me.
Huh. I would not have thought blues would go in there. For me, it sounds like Louisville.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think we were super influenced at that point. You know, we had met Rodin. I mean, you said earlier sludge punk, which I really like, because some people call that stuff math rock. What I like about sludge punk, and I don't like names for things, but what I liked about it when you said it is it's like you're getting sucked into this thing. Like you are walking through something where if you don't tread lightly, it's going to drag you down, you know, and you can feel people tearing themselves in and out of the songs. So I think that is a good way of talking about this kind of music. And I think we were also just like stretching. And we did these really stupid things too, where I think we tried to play some of these songs on Lollapalooza. So imagine that. Like imagine playing Fast Food Medicine slow when it's 110 degrees in the sun. You know, it's like terrible idea.
Yeah. There's great moments on this where you can really sense the stretching happening. The moment I think of right off the bat is that section in Cowed by the Blah Blah where, you know, the I've Lost More Than My Fingerprints section. It feels like an off-kilter sort of soft jazz, and it really works. It doesn't just feel like doing something interesting for its own sake, but it belongs in the song, and it's got elements of things that would wind up in that second Grenadine record, the one with the Mark Robinson Jazz Hands material.
A lot of my songs are songs where I know kind of what I was trying to say. And this is more, it is capturing an emotion. It's capturing an emotion more than even like a cloaked literal set of actions, which I think some of my songs are kind of a cloaked. And I think a lot of this also is getting more confident to actually say, even though it's said through metaphor, in many ways, to actually really be in the emotion instead of just to reference at it.
By the way, did Slaw initially have lyrics or was it intended to be an instrumental? Okay.
Yep. We'd seen Rodin be so great at this kind of song.
It was imagining what it'd be like to just like build the way that they all would build music together, you know. They were all throwing towards this thing. And I think Tsunami's always been a band that supported each other in the music, but like it was less of this kind of conjuring. When you were asking like how we wrote songs, like these were probably the closest to something that we built out of working it out. And we also might have worked out some of the stuff on the road. too. We'd often have like some songs that we would just know parts of them and we just sort of play bits of them and they would find their form.
I believe this is a bigger leap from Deep End than Brilliant Mistake is from Hearts Tremolo. Even though it doesn't seem that way, Brilliant Mistake is very much a, we're going to do this, now we're going to do this whole other thing, now we're going to do this whole other thing. But this, to me, feels like a less self-conscious leap forward, that it would blind one to think that it wasn't as big of a leap. To me, this is a massive leap. This is all of a sudden, you're making sort of your mature record that would normally come maybe 4 records in.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
We didn't have 4 records, did we?
And you should be ashamed of yourself. Jenny, did you feel like you were coming into your own? Do you feel like I'm overpraising it? Whether or not you feel that way, do you connect with this record in a similar kind of way? Like, were you as proud of it as I feel like you should be, or did you not connect with it like that? Was it like any other album?
I think we were taking ourselves more seriously, if maybe that's what this sounds like. It was wonderful to work with Brian Paulson. Steve Albini let us stay in his house, sleep in his beds, and John Loder mastered it beautifully. And if you get the original copy, which, isn't this one, it's like the prettiest picture disc you've ever seen in your life. So everything about it, I think we were taking it very seriously. I think maybe we felt like we were, like, it wasn't just like fun being a band. It was like we were actually a band now, maybe more.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we always felt like we were a band, but yeah, a little bit.
Also, generally the stakes, not to say the stakes were higher, it's just that there were a lot of amazing bands out being very busy and the label had more responsibilities. So Tsunami couldn't just like cast off something because we were booking shows. We had a booking agent. We had to like plan ahead. We had to make sure the label was functioning for other bands. So like generally the stakes were a little higher and we're overachievers. So I think a lot of it has to do with that too. Like we'll have some songs that have more richness to them, more depth, more dynamics, everything.
But it was the same mechanism, right? Like writing our first songs was like, I wonder if we could do this. Yeah. And it's just like once we'd been on the road longer, we're like, I wonder if we could do this, which was harder to do,
Yeah, true.
Well, it's a staggering piece of work. I think it's a masterpiece. I really do. And I give it 5 stars.
Wow.
So many 5 stars, Dave.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff means a lot to me. But not that one single that we talked about. Nope.
Yes.
That's fine.
Okay.
We're going to bury that single in the ground.
No, you're going to learn how to play it, and you're going to open your new sets with it.
Bad single.
Go to your room. Okay, so 1990. Oh, wait, what do you give it, Kristen?
Oh, so many songs on there I love playing. I'm glad we remastered it because I think it was missing a little bit of like fullness when it was recorded. I think the reason was we were trying to think that we could be super spare with not having a lot of effects or compression or this and that, like being really austere, let's say. But I would give it a 4.3.
Okay. Interestingly low.
Consistently low, right?
Consistently low.
I'm staying in like the zone here.
Yeah, you are.
Mid 3 to mid 4.
This is a record I'll be listening to, if I should be lucky to live so long, in decades.
Okay.
It really is a record for life, I think. Ever wondered what your favorite bands talk about after the gig on the long van ride between Reno and Salt Lake City? Do you miss having in-depth conversations about music with your closest friends, picking apart why some songs are good and why some miss the mark completely? Do you read every inch of the available liner notes and still shake a fist at the clouds yelling for more? Damn it, more? If any of this sounds familiar, 1001 Album Complaints is the podcast for you. Every week, musicians and close friends give irreverent but informed takes on a new classic album pulled randomly from the book 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. The hosts do extensive research telling the stories behind your favorite records and helping you better understand how songs, both great and terrible, were conceived and built from the ground up. In short, it's a deep dive with lots of laughs. So if you want to sound informed and funny when talking about music, I recommend you follow or subscribe to 1001 Album Complaints right now. Full disclosure, I've been on 1001 Album Complaints twice now, and both times I had a hell of a good time. Don't be fooled by the fun, offhanded interplay and the undeniable chemistry. It takes a lot of work to make this show appear as laid back and easy as it feels. An abundant amount of research goes behind every episode, and whether or not I agree with them, I have to respect the fact that the guys have always got an opinion, and they'll go down fighting trying to prove they're right. Seriously, check it out. I respect the hell out of these guys. Then you released a giant big old package of World Tour and other destinations, which is, if you didn't buy up all the singles like I did, you could have them packaged all together in this one comp. And you continued to tour the States in 95, subsequently had a 1-year hiatus while John Paymer attended UMass Amherst to complete his undergraduate degree. During this time, you started talking about winding down both Simple Machines and the band itself, because you were in debt and Tsunami was the cash cow. So you needed to put one more Tsunami record together and tour it to get in the black, which it does sound like the mechanics of it all are kind of a real sort of pain in the ass. As freeing as it must be to be able to actually engage in it, it does sound like a hell of a lot of work. As early as 95, you're talking about ending this thing, right?
Was it 95? I don't know. It felt like it was later. But there was definitely a moment where we weren't sure who was going to be in Tsunami, right? Because John was at school and Andrew had other ambitions. So
yeah. And, we couldn't keep an active band on the road anyway, right? We had to be at home, making sure the other records went out, too.
And you also had Licorice at the same time.
Yeah, it's true. I had Grenadine and, I had a bunch of things going on as well.
Licorice is super cool. We'll get to this in the other episode, but the Licorice single, Stalls, is really cool. There's a very unique progression with what happens on those 3 tracks. It's very different from the album itself. They're 2 very different standalone things. The album is almost like a Brechtian folk record because there's these outre, almost like, what the hell was that, noises that happen in the record. So following his graduation in 96, Paymer decided to stay in Amherst in order to save up so he could move to New York. So you enlisted the services of another Arlington drummer, Luther Gray, who was a jazz drummer, which is perfect for you at this time, and more importantly, a former Simple Machines mailroom intern. Having practiced with Gray for 6 months, you guys recorded your 4th album in Chicago at King Size Sound Labs, and the result was released in August 97 on Simple Machines, A Brilliant Mistake. Also, Andrew Webster was starting to follow different passions of his. So you called on Rob Christensen in order to make Mark Robinson jealous that there wasn't a full-on Grenadine reunion here. Did Mark try to edge his way in?
He did not. He was very busy with his unrest at that moment.
Yeah, A Brilliant Mistake. So unlike the other records, there's all kinds of guest appearances. You got Archer Pruitt playing melodica vibes and lap steel, John Upchurch, Mark Greenberg of the Cocktails, and horn work from Dave Max Crawford of Poi Dog Pondering, plus Rob Christensen playing brass as well. And you're also combining analog recording with Pro Tools. So you're going in all different kinds of directions here. And I love how you're trying everything out because this is it, right?
Well, I think it's a kind of make lemonade moment. Like if we can't have our band, it's super sad that we're not going to play together anymore. And I remember playing our last show with Tsunami and just feeling that sadness because we'd gone to all these amazing places together. But then, I think both Kristen and I are optimistic, forward-looking people. And then we're like, oh, okay, so now it gives us this permission to open up the doors and do all this other exciting stuff. And so I think it was amazing. Trip is an incredible drummer, totally game to try anything. He loves music. It's wonderful to play with him. We loved Amy Dominguez. Rob Christensen's amazing. Rob Christensen is amazing. And then Dave Trumpio was like so much fun to play with. We didn't give him enough credit, I think, on the record because there were lots of little parts and arrangements that he added in at different times.
Right from track 1, the shift is completely apparent. With Old Gray Mare, everything's got a much lighter touch to it, and the vast expanse of space that's afforded by the arrangement, and you're exploring a higher register of singing than you had, and there's just a clarity and presence and an immediacy, and really a calmed reassurance to your performance style and songwriting. Great lyrics, too. I've seen the best minds of my generation, drowning in their best designer medications, perfecting a dedication to a lazy fix. And correct me if I'm wrong, there's no chorus here. Is it just like a sort of cyclical type of song? It feels like it was destined to be an intro to a record, or that was its designation from the outset.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the first one is kind of a funeral dirge. Like, we knew the record label was going away. I think they're both making the same argument about why the record label is going away, but it's like a New Orleans funeral where you march to the cemetery singing dirges and you leave singing joyful songs or whatever. Like, so it's much more bratty on Great Mimes.
And then Kristen's back with a vengeance.
Yes, she is. Many songs.
I had a year to write 3 things.
Well, but I mean, the thing is, from the first album, with your vocals being brought down in the mix because you're, nervously dipping your toe in the pool, and now it couldn't be more oppositional to that kind of effect. The genres that you're utilizing are very much like, hey, check this out. I mean, The Workers Are Punished, the closest thing I could think of is almost an Eastern European polka vibe to it.
Yep, that was kind of what we were going for. Yeah. Also, the reason that we could do that was that we had Max Crawford. I think it was Max that played the accordion, like just like weird instruments that evoke certain styles of music that we hadn't yet considered.
Great Mimes strikes me as the mix of Deep End that you rejected.
Maybe.
Is that what it was?
It could be.
Because it sounds like a more cleaned up version of what you used to do.
Although this song is more simple. That's another interesting thing about this record, is that a bunch of the songs are more simple than the first songs that we wrote. Because I think I was noticing that a lot of people write more simple songs that have fewer parts to them and are less complicated. And then you leave space for other people in them.
That's interesting. So you're saying that these songs are more simple, yet they're just trying on all these different guises that makes it feel more complex?
I'm not trying to do everything. I'm sharing the responsibility. So like Over Mare is basically one chord for me.
Right.
Whereas like Flameproof Suit is lots and lots of different moving parts. And they're like 8 years apart from each other or whatever. And you'd think that they would be reversed. But then we also did weird, complicated things.
Double Shift, first appearance of horn charts. I don't know if I can be so bold as to say charts, but certainly horn work on a Tsunami record. And so after sitting out Hearts Tremolo because of the ridiculous amount of work that you had to do in 94, you're back in a big way, in an unmissable way, with Double Shift, with Workers Are Punished. It must have felt really good because you make a really strong imprint on this record.
Well, thank you. I had sort of forgotten until we got to the box set with Numero that had a clump of songs on this record. We didn't tour this record very much. So a lot of them didn't get played very often. So I'd sort of forgotten that these were all together. So yeah, it was fun to resurrect them for this box set.
And you have 4 songs on the record. You have Those Are the Two on the first side. Unbridled is as close as you come on A Brilliant Mistake to a traditional punk song, at least that I hear. And you definitely don't squander the opportunity to belt it out. It's a tender punk song. It's like the next step in the transformation of that sound for you. And then Hockey almost sounds like one of those old folk tunes with a traditional arrangement.
Yeah.
Is this regarding the label? Because it feels like there's a real depressed, downbeat feeling to this song specifically.
Pretty much, yes, because there's like being resigned to certain things. One of the little couplets in there is like, oh, you think we're so cool, like we've put out this mechanics guide, but underneath, if you knew how unstable things were, you probably would have a different opinion about things. So it's kind of like that. The vibe of us trying to push ahead because of what people expect of us, and also understanding there was a lot of like unstable ground underneath us.
A couple of Jenny songs that I really connect with: Liar's Dice, Flight of the Chickens, which the closest song that I hear that relates to it for me is Velvet Underground's Some Kind of Love. There's like a coolness, like a genuine coolness, but it's a ballad and there's a hushed intensity to it. And you've got the horns in there too. The horns work beautifully on this. It's not, an unnecessary augmentation. It really is an organic thing. And it doesn't feel like Grenadine 2. It doesn't feel at all connected to that work whatsoever. And your vocals toward the end grows so intense. That's an amazing one. And also PBS. You don't really have another song that's like this one. PBS, it's almost like a spectral piece of late 60s psych with a nursery rhyme style verse that ties it together. And the vibes are so effective that I almost started crying when I first heard it. It's so beautiful and a perfect last Tsunami song. It's almost like you did know this was going to be your last one because it so perfectly is a send-off. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard the Replacements' final song, The Last, on All Shook Down, but it's like they knew, I guess, that they were going out. This feels like you knew, maybe something in your gut knew, but how do you feel about this batch of songs that you had?
For Liar's Dice, this feels like a puzzle to me because like I'm explaining how to play a dice game or what happens in a specific kind of dice game called Kariki that we all love and that we would always play on tour in the song. So it's like the rules of the game are part of the rules of the game of this never going to happen love affair kind of song. That's one of my favorite songs I've written. I like that one a lot. It just has the right emotion for it. It has like it has like the yearning, but like a more mature yearning, like a kind of looking back on it kind of thing. And, you know, the idea that there are these rules, there are rules, and that's part of it. I don't know. And again, all these little bits of playing with the arrangements is stuff we were trying to do with our little clumsy original selves and being able to sort of like pull back a little bit and write the song and then let other musicians come in and help us make it sound more like what we hear in our head is absolutely happening. So you're pulling that part out. With PBS, like it's called PBS because it sounds like the interstitial music on PBS from like between Sesame Street, like up next Sesame Street or whatever it is. Or, you know, up next, you know, Living with the Condor, our nature's strongest blah, blah. I think that song is very much like the kinds of music that I tried to write in Antidote. You know, I think it has a similarity to it. And I think also the arrangement stuff that we got to do here had to do with Antidote as well, or were the same kinds of baby steps towards arranging things.
This record's so great because there's so many exciting possibilities that shoot out of it at every turn. And yet a lot of these roads had only been taken the one time. They all could have been stylistic destinations that you could have adopted, and they were just a means to their own ends. I actually did write that, intriguingly, this is the perfect midway point between This Heart's Tremolo and the full-on exploratory genius of Antidote. So it's a sort of end that wound up actually being more like a new beginning. It's a really interesting record, and it's a perfect final record. It's like you took her hiatus and the stylistic schizophrenia settled in from out of nowhere and you just grew everywhere. The freedom must have felt ecstatic, but also I could imagine it being a little bit scary because, like, who are you then as a band? What's your identity then?
Yeah.
But it wound up not mattering. That part of it wound up being beside the point. I'll give this 4 1/3. I love the record. I don't like it as much as Heart's Tremolo, but it's so playful and so much fun. It's like a cubby, like looking at all these cubbies with all these distinct compartments in it. Kristen, how good is this record?
I would give it, this is probably going to see a cop-out, of like another 4.3, only because we just didn't ever get to the point where we could play with confidence on tour because, yes, I just looked it up. We did like 70 shows on this record, which it seems like a lot of shows, but there are
I would never have guessed that. I would have guessed like 24 or something like that.
Honestly, and these songs are still very hard for me to play sometimes, so you have to be like so focused and make sure you don't mess it up because they're a little bit precise. And so you never got to be like, yeah, just jumping on stage and playing songs because they had a more ambition and more technical parts that we were striving for. But I'm not a good enough guitar player to be like, I got it. So you got quite serious about things.
I'd also say that like we probably would have been jumping more had we toured it for a year and a half or whatever.
Totally.
Because like when I go back and I look at the music we were playing before Heart's Tremolo and after Heart's Tremolo, and there's not a lot of live footage of us, but when I see that, I always I can't believe how effortless it was. You know, like we just knew where we were in the song. If things got loose, we could just pull it back together again. And with this stuff, we just didn't have enough time to do that. I think also we probably were practicing more. And then one of the dangers of being in bands where other musicians are much better musicians than you is that they don't need the practice that you need. So like you're wasting their time when you're practicing with them. but you need more time to stretch out in the music with them because you just don't have as many hours.
The first week of December 97 is when your last tour wrapped up. Your label was wrapping up as well. There was a finale party scheduled for the Black Cat in DC in late March of 98. The send-off Kick the Bucket shows would attract more than 500 fans and feature performances by a who's who of Simple Machine acts and friends, sets from Superchunk, Ida, Versus, Eggs, Grenadine, Franklin Bruno, Lungfish, and more. And after a few more gigs in mid-April, your indefinite hiatus began. And in 98, Simple Machines wrapped. And, right, it was 98?
Yeah.
Okay. So you joined up for a couple sets between 2001 and 2003 to perform at the Lady Fest festivals in DC and Philly. And, then, of course, there's a very exciting epilogue. You carried your ideals and your vision forward. But before we get into the epilogue, let me just give you what I wrote on the overview and shape of your arc. One of the last true DIY projects that stayed true to its ideals from start to finish, Tsunami didn't just run, fortify, and justify the existence of a label. The two of you wound up growing in leaps and bounds musically as wildly as any band that I've ever heard. Deep End is the perfect real-time scuzz intro throwdown artifact, capturing in a snapshot that initial moment when you hit water, along with those insanely excellent early singles. But This Heart's Tremolo, to me, was a massive, massive step forward, the songwriting prowess reaching full bloom in a way that seemed impossible to me at the time. Then with Brilliant Mistake, as sour a taste as you had to have had in your mouths at the time, it somehow wound up emanating from the megaphone with such candied sweetness. It was loud enough for all to hear, but the sophistication in your writing, especially in yours, Kristen, as you'd fully sat out Heart's Tremolo, was mind-blowing. The inspiration of your shared adventures, of the time you'd moved together as one, it really does carry, and just as importantly, transitions into seedlings that take root in your listeners' ears. It did in mine, certainly, and it's one of the reasons that I've been as dedicated as I have to Discograffiti for the past 3 years. You proved that DIY wasn't just a state of mind, wasn't just a concept, just some nostalgic artifact as removed from present-day reality as your album covers. It's real. It's an absolute present-day reality, as essential, if not more so, in 2024 than it was in 92 and 97. So, top 3 albums, I would say that Deep End is my 3rd favorite, Brilliant Mistake is 2, and Heart's Tremolo is 1.
Gosh.
Well, for me, I'm just touched that you feel like you're part of the same set of people who are striving to build different systems and to try to find a way to bring your excitement, enthusiasm, obsession out into the world in a way that inspires other people. And so, you can cut this part out, but the key thing for me is I feel like even though the way you talk about music sometimes is very different than me, like the way you're thinking about what was the arc of my career intention or whatever it was. And, not to pretend like that's a wrong thing to have or whatever, but it's just different. It's just like you're a different animal in the zoo. But what I would say is I want a zoo that has your animal and Kristen and me and all the animals that want to build better things that actually celebrate and love music and art. And so that's why I'm 100% down with supporting Discograffiti, because you go deep and obsessive on music. And that's how I got to music myself.
Thank you.
5 stars.
Wow, breaking form. So how have you professionally kept the Tsunami torch aflame?
The Tsunami torch was like the punk rock torch. So it's like the flame is running all the way through. Ask people who've worked with me. I have a really strong vision of how things should be and a work ethic.
So in addition to the box set that Numero Group is putting out that comes out today, you are in the spring of 2025 going out with Ida, right?
That's right. Dan is one of the main reasons I ever thought I could be in a band. He and I would sing covers in my bedroom. I remember one time we walked into some party in Georgetown and just went into a room and started singing songs and people just sort of came into the room and listened to us. And he's like one of my most trusted oldest friends. It was just like an incredible gift that we had, that we got to put out some of those Ida records and tour with them and spend all that time with them. So it just feels really nice that if we're going to go out and do a little bit of this stuff again, we're doing it with our buddies. So yeah, like I'm super excited about that. I also love that they're really funny people and super game to do stuff. So when we suggested that we just coin flip at the beginning of the show to see who would play first, with this idea that it's not like, we're not going to figure out who's bigger in New York and who's bigger in Philadelphia and who's going to be bigger in LA or whatever. We're just going to say, like, it is just, we're equal. We're going to flip a coin. And then we're going to have to figure out these logistics, like what's the opening song? What's the transition song? And then we want to bring all our friends on stage too. I already know a couple people I want to be singing Pump Means Cuddle at some point in our set. And it's also tiring because like we've played a couple of these shows and like when you're 56, it doesn't feel the same. I mean, some parts of it do, you know, like John Paymer said when we were practicing, he's like, I feel like I'm 18 years old. Like I feel like I've just like vortexed back into my 18-year self. And that is true. But also like your 56-year-old self wakes up later that night and just feels like, how will I do that tomorrow? I'm very interested in what it's going to be like. And what a luxury that we get to do it. It's so exciting.
It's so cool. Really, at long last that it happens. I'm really excited to see it. Really, I couldn't be more excited for you. And I really do hope, I know we're going to talk at another time about your other bands, your other iterations, but you have a solo career that has been bookmarked and has been very patiently waiting for you. And I know that chapter's not over. There's no question, because the human being who created Antidote, there's no way that that's the final creative songwriting stroke of that human being. There's absolutely no way. So I'm eager to find out where that voice is left off and what's next.
Yeah, and I'm eager to tell you.
Kristen, talk to me about how you've carried forth the vision of Tsunami into your life post-Tsunami.
I am a unstoppable showgoer, especially because I don't have to worry about babysitters or anything anymore. And my husband was a concert promoter, so I was soaking in it. So I really like going to see bands, love a huge range of things because there's just so much going on. I've also been in a band in Philly for a long time that's super fun, just like a bit heavier rock band that is 4 women and a guy, and we gossip on Friday nights and have a drink, and then we go figure out some new songs, you know? So it's really fun just to play those. And then, you know, revisiting Tsunami as we are right now, just to celebrate the box set, but also play shows, is like a new chance. Like I'm taking vocal lessons for the first time ever, which is fascinating and so interesting. And I'm really excited because there's a lot of opportunities we can take advantage of, just doing it just for fun.
Numero Group, the box set is called Loud Is As, and it's a compilation of everything you've done as a band, and it tells an incredible story. It tells it beautifully. It tells it tearfully, succinctly. From my end of things, you got to have it. If you don't have everything already, you certainly need it. But even if you have all this stuff, you need to need it again.
Lovingly packaged.
It's as pretty, or I won't say it's more pretty than what we did, but it gets 5 stars next to Kristin Thomson's designs of 5 stars. It's just beautiful.
There's a lot of love in how it was put together.
Yeah. And what a luxury. We don't have boxes in our living rooms. Neither Kristen nor I have boxes full of records that we have to sell out to people.
Finally, somebody else does the dirty work for you. All right, that about does it. If you enjoyed this episode, please Venmo Gebro. I repeat, Venmo Gebro at David-Gebro, Gebroe. Please keep in mind this is entirely how I support my wife and my 5-year-old son, so don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not giving. Venmo me a tip at David-Gebro. Stay tuned, because next week we've got part 1 of a shockingly candid 3.5-hour interview with the Righteous Brothers' Bill Medley. Okay, here's the week up ahead. This Sunday, our weekly show within a show, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast, drops for our Patreon's private tier. These are real people with talent and a burning fire deep inside, just like you and I. Then come Monday, we shine the interrogation beam right back down on Jenny Toomey, who apparently doesn't get a break, seeing as Tsunami's only one of about 10 bands in which she's played an integral part. Our major tier will have all the mysteries solved and myths debunked in a very special hour-long interview entitled Jenny Toomey Has a Million Other Bands That Aren't Tsunami. Don't miss it because, come on, why run the risk of being forever curious when that itch is so eminently scratchable? And then on Wednesday, the Lieutenant tier get their early release, ad-free, super extended director's cut of the Bill Medley interview. And then come Friday, the rest of you penny pinchers get to join in on the action. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, my mom, Jenny Toomey, Kristin Thomson, Numero Group, Rudy Fishman, Becky Boyd, Jay Schultz, Cream Magazine, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the Soldiers of Sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you, my friends. Speaking of friends, it's high time for some new ones. They're in our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the show, but there's a hell of a lot more. You get recaps of the day in music history, the ability to pitch questions to guests, polls that put you in the driver's seat on guest and band decisions, access to a thriving creative hub if you're looking for a collaborator, and much, much more. So make sure you don't miss out. You can find the link to the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound Facebook page right there in the show notes. And if you don't mess with the Zuck, no sweat. Just email me at info@discograffiti.com and I'll keep you in the loop. So now that it's done and you want more, another way to dive even deeper into the Gen X flag wavers of 1990s indie alternative music is to leap headfirst into the Mark Robinson series. That's episodes 128 and 130, number 135 and 136. Will Hart rating the Olivia Tremor Control, that's 131 to 133. My interview with Mike Watt rating the Minutemen, that's 124 to 126. The David Pajo series, including the man himself rating Slint's discography, that's episodes 94 to 101. No Age's Randy Randall rating the Jesus Lizard, that's 70 and 71. My interview with No Age's Randy Randall, that's episode 88. The Bob Nastanovich Rates Pavement series, that's 49 to 58. Nirvana, episode 30. The Replacements with Bob Mayer, that's 28 and 29. 18 is the Pixies, 12 is PJ Harvey, and 4 is Beck. And of course, be sure to mark your calendars, because next Friday, November 15th, we're coming at you with the Righteous Brothers' Bill Medley. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. And so, from now till then, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti!